Look at this photograph of Edwardian women taking a walk. Notice the high collars, heavy layers, and uniformity of presentation. This is England at the turn of the 20th century, a society held together by strict rules, where maintaining appearances superseded how one actually felt. E.M. Forster described this social framework as the outer life. It was a system of class boundaries and dictated etiquette that governed nearly every interaction, leaving little room for individuality. Young women of the era, like Lucy Honeychurch, were meticulously molded by this environment. From a very young age, her primary concern was learning to do the proper thing, perfectly reflecting the expectations of her family and her class. This psychological confinement was mirrored directly in the physical spaces they inhabited. Take a look at this parlor room. It is heavily curated, densely packed, and intensely structured. Every object has an assigned place, leaving almost no room to move freely. A society built entirely on maintaining the outer life requires its citizens to continually suppress their own desires. To keep the illusion of order intact, individuals have to actively erase their own identities. Beneath that heavy social armor lay what Forster called the inner life. This is the realm of authentic desires and unscripted emotions, everything the polite society actively sought to monitor. For Lucy, the only sanctioned release valve for her inner life is the piano. When she plays, the polite facade drops, replaced by a sudden, aggressive physical energy that reveals a side at her she usually keeps hidden. Historically, art and music functioned as vital loopholes in this restrictive era. They were culturally acceptable outlets that allowed heavily monitored people to betray a hint of their hidden emotional depth without breaking the rules of etiquette. While the outer life strictly controls her conversation and her manners, Lucy's relationship with music proves she harbors a deep internal intensity, ready to be activated by a change in environment. That shift begins in Italy. Look at this expansive view overlooking Florence and the Arno River. Compared to the claustrophobic parlors of England, the landscape is defined by spontaneous beauty and wide openness. Suddenly, the familiar English social cues are gone. Without the strict etiquette she relies on to navigate daily interactions, Lucy is left disoriented, rendering her vulnerable to new ways of thinking. In this exposed state, she meets George Emerson and his father. They are unconventional companions who routinely violate class etiquette by speaking to her with direct, unvarnished emotional honesty. When Lucy observes the Emersons' blunt honesty, it clashes directly with her instinct to be polite. This friction makes the once certain rules of her upbringing feel like arbitrary barriers rather than necessary safeguards for her character. Deeply ingrained psychological restraints are difficult to break from the inside. Stepping completely outside of one's geographic and cultural boundaries is frequently the required first step to dismantling them. But vacations end. Returning to the thatched roof cottages of rural England means an immediate resumption of those familiar, rigid routines. This photograph of a highly formal outdoor tea perfectly captures the world of Cecil Vyse, the man Lucy is expected to marry. Cecil is the embodiment of the outer life, highly intellectual, performative, and obsessed with social hierarchy. George Emerson offers the exact opposite proposition. He represents the inner life, bringing raw emotional courage and a total rejection of the social pretense that Cecil so carefully maintains. We can map Lucy's torn allegiances on this axis. Cecil offers societal safety. George demands authenticity. Cecil treats art, nature, and people as objects to collect and categorize, keeping actual human experience at a distance. George experiences those elements viscerally, participating in life directly, without boundaries. This choice carries a weight far beyond romance. Lucy is deciding who gets to define her reality, the society she was born into, or the person she discovered in Florence. The tension inevitably reaches a crisis point. Once exposed to the reality of George's honesty, the performative culture that Cecil represents becomes entirely intolerable to Lucy. Yet acting on this realization carries a severe social cost. Choosing the inner life requires her to sever her ties to the safety and respectability of her Edwardian upbringing. It also requires an internal pivot. She must break a lifelong habit of lying to herself, merely to appease the expectations of the people around her. Lucy isn't just changing her mind, she's dismantling a life. To step into the inner life, she has to endure the social wreckage of a broken engagement and the cooling of her family's respect. The author of this conflict, E.M. Forster, seen here, was a social observer. He used this narrative to systematically examine the restraints placed upon individuals by strict class etiquette. The ultimate argument of his work is clear. Genuine human connection and personal truth must always take precedence over tradition and convention. A Room with a View remains a lasting classic because the effort to abandon a performative life for one of authenticity is a conflict that never truly ages.